I'm Tommy Johnson.
Hey, I'm Taylor.
And we started our journey in Solana over 3 years ago with Sci-Fi, formerly known as Sci-Options. It was the first ever American and European options protocols on-chain. We had the first ever inter-ecosystem acquisition with Tap Finance, which brought us into the structured product space, as well as the borrow lending space to increase capital efficiency. At our peak, we had over $100 million in TVL in those smart contracts. We were the first ever DAO to put all of our SAFs on chain, or sales of future tokens. And we are currently the second largest DAO based on non-governance assets today.
So Solana aims to be the global state machine. As a global state machine, we need mass coordination. And to do that today, we typically use DAOs. And if we want Solana to thrive as a community, we need flourishing sub-communities. And to do that, we need efficient and effective DAOs. But today, there are many challenges involved. So we're going to talk about some of those challenges and some of the wrong assumptions that we made early on that might help these future DAOs operate effectively. So I need to get a little preface before we go into the problem. These slides were made and submitted over 4 weeks ago, and a lot has changed. We've learned a lot. So when we get to the solutions, we're going to do our best to add more information that may not be conveyed on the slides. I mean, we had a couple tokens use the launching mechanisms a week ago with Cypher and Flowmatic. And we've learned a lot through many discussions with lots of teams that are thinking about their DAOs, their tokenomics, and everything in between. So let's start with the problem and things that are critical to think about when it comes to governance and tokenomics. And one thing is clear: flow is crucial to the success of a token ecosystem. And it starts with creating and distributing your token. And that process can begin months, if not years, in advance with legal entity structures set up, planning for a future token. Thinking about tax implications with founder rounds, venture investments, airdrops, liquidity mining programs, etc. You need to build a strong community too. And that takes time, that takes engagement, that takes a lot of effort from many different people. And then where do you start? How do you price the token? Does price start high and low? How much supply do you release? When do you release that supply? And over what time period? Through an auction, you need to figure out how do you balance aggressive buyers, not only in the beginning of the auction, throughout the auction, but beyond the auction. If you exhaust all the buyers interested in your token or your ecosystem throughout the auction period, there's going to be nothing left beyond. You're going to see a token that has a successful auction and subsequently just goes down. So it's very clear that flow, volume, etc., is crucial for the success of a token-based ecosystem. So let's talk about some of the common problems with DAO governance today. I think the biggest one that we can all agree on is participation. And part of that is also retention. Let's take a look at a few weeks ago. We had the Synthetify attack where someone put up a proposal to swap out the on-chain program in order to execute a malicious instruction that basically drained the DAO's treasury. And this all comes down to lack of participation. First off, how did this malicious attacker be able to get enough supply to tip the voting threshold? Also, how did no one take a look at the proposal during the 7-day voting period in order to vote, to veto it from passing? And so it's really a problem about participation. Now, how many of you in this audience hold governance SPL tokens? Okay, wow, it's only like maybe a few percent. And now of those that hold these governance SPL tokens, how many of you have participated in a DAO vote or DAO proposal in the last month? Okay, it's about maybe 20% of those that hold those tokens. And which is kind of alarming because we're here at a Solana conference talking on a developer stage. So this should really be the core audience that is participating in DAO voting. Now, one of the big assumptions we made when we started out and started the Sci-Fi DAO was that institutions would be able to participate. But we quickly found out that they could not. Over the last year or two, it's become very clear that regulatory environment is uncertain. Many of these institutions aren't sure what kind of liabilities they have, and therefore they're unwilling to participate. Funny enough, even the Solana Ventures team cannot participate in DAO governance. And so, while some of these institutions are working to set up blocker entities or mitigate their legal risks, it's really not adequate for a DAO to wait for institutions to participate. We need DAOs to happen and be able to work effectively on chain today.
And if you don't have if you don't have institutions participating, and we don't actually see a lot of retail participation, where does participation come from? It's very clear that retail does not participate. But this is not a problem just for crypto or DAOs in general. I mean, we see this in traditional finance and equities. CNBC wrote a year or two ago that only 8% of individual investors or retail investors actually participate in shareholder voting processes. We've seen a $1 billion blockchain ecosystem pass a fork with just 15 votes. That doesn't seem like there's a lot of participation and decentralization there. And so to get to full decentralization, we need a lot of participation. We've also seen meme stocks rally and fail because of lack of participation, fail to pass governance initiatives because of the lack of participation from shareholder voting. So it's very clear that if you're designing a tokenomics ecosystem that relies on governance and proposals to pass, then your tokenomics is not going to work because of the lack of participation. And so you have to think critically about how you organize your DAO and your token ecosystem and understand where that participation's come from. And we saw this firsthand with Sci-Fi. The DAO treasury has accumulated over $1 million in non-governance token assets, but it's just sitting there. We built a lot of infrastructure into governance and realms, so that way our members could participate in governance and actually drive the ecosystem, but that doesn't happen. So we need to shift the model, and we need to solve these problems. Now, one thing I want to touch on here is that it's important that we move beyond centralized market making. As Tommy mentioned earlier, having liquidity on your governance token is important. This is part of the issue with the Synthetify attack, where the attacker was able to accumulate a large enough portion of the token supply in order to pass their proposal. As you can see on the screen here, I have a couple screenshots of Coinbase, where you can see that there is over $31 million on the order book in this screenshot. And on the right side, we have TVL of some decentralized exchanges, where it's roughly about $12 million. Now, TVL isn't the best metric in order to show liquidity, but we think it's a decent proxy for the data that we pulled together for these slides. But to understand why centralized market making is an issue, we need to understand how they work. Now, when you have your governance token and you're trying to get supply out there and trying to get liquidity on your token, you might talk to some institutions and start papering up an agreement for them to market make your token. And they'll take this token as a loan, and they'll again go quote prices on various exchanges, whether it's centralized or decentralized. But this is problematic, because not your keys, not your coins. And at the end of the day, when you're loaning these tokens to the institution, they're the ones holding the keys. And we learned this firsthand, as over a year ago, our primary market maker went bankrupt. And now there is a significant portion of the Psy token locked in these bankruptcy proceedings to this day. And that's just not healthy for your DAO and your governance and community. So, using our learnings, we'd like to share some of the solutions. So, we talked a little bit about the why, the problems. As we heard from Airfoil, the why is very important. So, we need to figure out governance and tokenomics ecosystems on Solana. And we can't talk about governance, we can't talk about governance-driven tokenomics without first talking about SPL governance and realms, which are critical to any sort of on-chain governance. Realms makes governance, infrastructure, and setup extremely easy with a beautiful wizard. It supports SPL token-based weighting. It supports NFT token-weighted votes. It supports an ecosystem of plugins and flexibility to add other community vote mechanisms and infrastructure. And there's a robust integrations with other on-chain protocols and ecosystems to create governance-driven treasury management. There's also improvements coming to the delegation portion of governance. So not only can you delegate from a cold wallet to hot wallet to make voting on the go very easy, but also so ecosystems can run full-scale delegation programs so those who can't directly participate and vote on-chain but may be able to delegate can delegate to community delegators.
Okay, so what you need to set up a governance in Realms? Well, first you need a governance token. But how do you get this governance token to your communities? A lot of times maybe it's private rounds or selling token to various individuals. And we think what's important is doing a fair token launch. We want to move beyond this low float, high FDV narrative that has plagued Solana for so long. We think that while sometimes necessary, we think that we should minimize private sales because having an over-concentration of your governance token into only a few participants' hands can be problematic. So, what have we built with Armada? Well, the first step is token launch mechanisms. We have various mechanisms like the liquidity bootstrapping curve and what we're calling the virtual liquidity bootstrapping pools. So whether you want to start price high and end low, start price low, end high, or haven't run an auction over the course of hours or days, Armada does not make any assumptions on how you want to launch your token, but gives you the tools so that you can have a fair token launch.
So once you've launched a token, the next set of tools is actually focused on getting robust on-chain liquidity. And that starts with Armada's concentrated liquidity market making program. It currently sits on top of Orca's Whirlpool and delegates market making authority to manage positions on that underlying pool to an institutional market maker on the back end. And if a team has their own designated market maker, they can actually just plug in directly with this program so they can manage the community's assets on their behalf and making better, more informed decisions about where things are in the ecosystem. The users only have to worry about deposit and withdrawal. And with Armada's concentrated liquidity market making program, it allows for multiple positions and flexibility in strategies so we can have more concentrated liquidity on chain, making best price execution available on Solana. There's no reason Solana shouldn't be the primary place to get involved in a token ecosystem. If you can imagine these meme coins that have launched in Solana in the past, there should be no reason that people are getting involved in these ecosystems through a centralized exchange. Let's bring them on chain and make them execute trades on Solana. And what we're really unveiling today, because we've launched the concentrated liquidity a month ago, but we have a whole nother suite of products. We've talked about launching a token, we've talked about getting liquidity on that token, and then we've briefly touched on governance and governance-driven tokenomics. But what does that look like? How do we get there, and what tools are available to developers? So we've created a couple programs that give you the ability to design modular and flexible tokenomics ecosystems that can even be governance-driven. So if you see on this slide, you can see an example of what one of these systems might look like. You have multiple protocols like trading or borrow lending that are driving fees into this ecosystem. And then we have the demultiplexer program that actually decides and distributes those fees to different governance or different actions, such as treasury deposits, rewarding stakers, buying some sort of pair and adding protocol-owned liquidity, buying and sending tokens somewhere, etc. And so in this system, you can see we could create something like 20% of fees goes to the governance treasury. Another 30% goes to the insurance fund. Another 25% of fees go to buying and protocol-owned liquidity. And the other 25% could go to rewarding stakers. But it's extremely flexible and modular, so you can decide how the tokenomics worked. And with the plugin with the staking and SPL governance, governance main role is to actually change these distribution weights. So you can actually have community members that are making proposals as to switching where these percentage of fees get driven. And that's crucial for the success of a tokenomics ecosystem and creating sustainability in that ecosystem. But it starts with staking.
So when we were rethinking tokenomics, we figured staking is a great mechanism to have community members signal that they are long-term participants, which is very important when you need to have when you want to have a thriving DAO. But when we looked at the staking contracts that exist today, nothing quite met our needs. You could either stake and accrue rewards, but then my tokens were locked up in the staking contract, and I couldn't deposit them into realms, and therefore I couldn't vote on DAO proposals, thus minimizing the available participation in the DAO. So as a part of Armada's Fleet 2, we decided to take a first pass at this and say, how can we build a staking program that allows our community to participate in rewards, but also participate in governance? So we have built a staking program that allows any DAO to come in and configure whether they want linearly scaled stake weights, so you can reward your longer-term participants with more rewards and more voting power, but then also have the stake weight representation as an SPL token. So you can take that SPL token and deposit into governance, so you can then participate in voting with that weighted vote power, but also maintaining your stake so you can receive any sort of rewards that the community decides to pass back to you.
And the other program that I hit on was the demultiplexer. And not only does it allow you to have robust, flexible tokenomics, but it also can give you transparency into where fees are accruing from the protocol and where they're going to. And it starts with a default strategy. So, like we said, we wanted to focus on minimizing the need for governance proposals as much as possible. So the governance might initiate a default strategy where any number of tokens that are coming into the demultiplexer instance are distributed to these weights. So, it could be USDC, Wrap Sol, or Bonk, and they're coming in here with the default strategy and going 10% to the treasury and 90% to staking rewards. But what happens if you have your own token, your own governance token, and you want to set up a different strategy? Well, you just create a different strategy weight for that specific token. So here's an example of an organization that has a USDC specific strategy. So USDC coming into this organization from borrow lending or vaults are going into the demultiplexer instance, and 100% is going straight to protocol-owned liquidity. So it gives you the flexibility to have a default, so no matter what pools you're spinning up or other assets your organization is accruing, there will be a strategy in place for it. But if the organization wants to get specific or create different mechanisms for their own token, that can be achieved. It's easy, it's flexible, and it gives the organization the tools to build any sort of tokenomics model that they want.
Now this is all self-hosted and white-labeled infrastructure. So that means that all of the UIs you've seen here today are available for your team to use when using these programs, which means that you get to maintain your branding while your engineers can focus on your core product. Now, to summarize, Armada's 3 stages of governance and tokenomics infrastructure. Step 1 is token launch mechanisms, helping teams have fair launches without having to rewrite their own launch programs. Step 2 is getting liquidity on those governance assets. And then step 3 is the tokenomics. What can your community do with the token after you've launched it or after they've bought it on chain and whatnot? So with that, join the fleet, and thank you so much.
Thank you.